There is a mystery, an ancient pattern that echoes through time. The great alliances of nations are not just written in the halls of politics, but in the scrolls of ancient truth. For years, America and India walked as partners, economically, militarily, culturally. The world watched this relationship grow like a mighty tree, its roots deep in democracy, its branches reaching toward global peace. But in 2025, a shift, a tremor in the alliance. Something deeper has moved beneath the surface. The question is not merely about foreign policy. The question is ancient. Can a covenant be broken when a friend becomes distant? When silence replaces strength, the signs must be read not just politically, but prophetically. The betrayal. If it is betrayal, it's not new. It's a cycle. Ancient Israel faced this when its allies turned not with war, but with absence. The absence of loyalty is louder than the presence of hostility. And now India, once courted and praised, watches as the dragon of betrayal rises not with weapons, but with policy shifts, arms deals, and secret meetings behind closed doors. There is a mystery, an ancient pattern that echoes through time beyond the borders of empires and across the dust of fallen kingdoms. It is not simply a matter of geopolitics or diplomacy, but of divine design, historical repetition. Patterns emerge when nations rise and fall, when alliances are made and broken, and when one power betrays another not out of necessity, but out of blindness. What we see in 2025 is not a new betrayal, but a return to a pattern that has repeated for millennia. America and India once stood together, not merely in trade or defense, but in a symbolic covenant of democratic values, mutual vision, and shared strategic interests. That alignment was not a random event. It was built slowly, deliberately, with each handshake, treaty, and joint military drill echoing a deeper unity. It was the alignment of the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy coming together in an age where freedom seemed threatened from all sides. Yet even as the world moved toward this alignment, shadows were forming. Behind the noise of headlines and political speeches, decisions were being made in secret chambers. Whispers became policies, and policies began to shape a new narrative. One where the bonds between nations were not rooted in loyalty, but in leverage. In 2025, this pattern has reached its critical point. America, under shifting political winds, has begun to drift, not openly, but subtly. Aid packages redirected, strategic conversations delayed, high-level meetings postponed without explanation. These are not the acts of hostility, but of silent withdrawal. Silence speaks volumes. And in this silence, India is left with a question, not just of policy, but of prophecy. When ancient Israel walked with powerful allies that believed in the strength of human agreements, but those agreements were fragile. And when the allies abandoned Israel, judgment followed, not because of war, but because of misplaced trust. Today, we see the same echoes. India, despite rising economically, militarily, and diplomatically, now finds itself watching as its closest partner looks elsewhere. The betrayal is not declared, it is demonstrated. In defense halls and intelligence briefings and closed-door conferences with nations that once opposed American interests, there's a realignment taking place, and it carries the scent of ancient missteps. In the scriptures, alliances formed out of fear always ended in chaos. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon. They all offered protection to the chosen nation, but at a price. And when the price was paid, the protector became the oppressor. In 2025, the same spirit is at work. A friendship once forged in the crucible of mutual respect now bends under the pressure of geopolitical strategy. As tensions rise in Asia and as new global threats appear, America is tempted to create counterbalances. And in that temptation, it looks to old adversaries with new lenses, forgetting the past, blind to the consequences. In the eyes of the political strategist, this is a move of leverage. But in the eyes of the divine, it is the making of a counter-covenant, a union formed not from righteousness, but from compromise. In ancient times, Israel aligned with Egypt, not because Egypt had changed, but because the threat of Assyria loomed large. In doing so, it abandoned its higher calling. That alignment cost it dearly. Today, the spirit of that alignment lives again. Pakistan, a nation whose actions have often contradicted peace, is being pulled into the inner circles of American policy. This is not because of a sudden shift in values or a great awakening in vision. It is because of fear, strategy, and the illusion of control, and yet control is the very thing this alliance forfeits. For every step toward Pakistan is a step away from principle. Every agreement made in haste becomes a burden carried in crisis. There is a cost to binding oneself to a nation whose foundation is unstable. In the prophetic realm, binding with instability brings instability into one's own camp. The seeds of confusion are sown not only in the soil of the foreign partner, but in the heart of the one who initiates the covenant. America, in seeking advantage through this new alignment, may believe it is gaining a strategic partner. But in truth, it is empowering a force that does not share its values, its vision, or its veracity. And in so doing, it alienates a nation that did. India, for years, stood beside America, not with demands, but with dignity. It offered alliance without threat, cooperation without coercion. It was not a transactional relationship. It was a transformative one. But now, as the tables turn, India watches, betrayed not by hostility, but by replacement. In prophetic history, betrayal often comes not in confrontation, but in neglect. The ally left out of the room feels the sting more deeply than the enemy brought in. For betrayal is most painful when it wears the face of friendship. Pakistan, now elevated, becomes the twist in the story. It is the unexpected element, the shadow cast over the narrative of partnership. And in that shadow, the light of former unity fades. This is more than a diplomatic shift. It is a prophetic warning. When a nation binds itself to what is unstable, it invites instability. When it elevates what is double-minded, it becomes double-minded. And when it trades honor for advantage, it loses both. The rise of Pakistan in American favor will not bring peace. It will bring confusion. It will not forge a stronger alliance, but fracture the existing ones. It will not silence the threats, but summon new ones. For in giving power to that which has not changed its nature, one is not creating peace, but preparing for a storm. And yet, even in the midst of this rising storm, a purpose is unfolding. India, though seemingly cast aside, is not diminished. Rather, it is being refined. It is being prepared for a moment when it must walk a new path, one not dependent on any superpower, but on its own strength, its own clarity, its own prophetic calling. There are moments in history when betrayal becomes a blessing, when rejection births revelation. And this may be such a moment. America may believe it is playing a clever game, but heaven watches a dangerous exchange, and if the course is not corrected, it will be America that finds itself isolated, not by design, but by divine response. For when you trade a faithful partner for an unstable one, you do not gain two friends. You lose one and corrupt the other. The question is not merely what America will do with Pakistan, but what America will become because of it. Will it become a nation that honors its alliances, or one that treats them as disposable? Will it be led by vision or by fear? Will it rise in integrity or fall in compromise? These are not just political questions. They are prophetic ones. And the answers will shape the course not only of foreign policy, but of national destiny. The alliance with Pakistan may seem like a twist, but it is more than that. It is a test of allegiance, a test of clarity, a test of truth. And it is a test that carries consequences far beyond the borders of Asia. It reaches into the heart of America's identity. And it calls for awakening, not only in India, but in all who still believe in the power of righteous alignment. The counter-covenant has been formed. The twist has occurred. Now the question remains, who will see it and who will have the courage to speak the truth in its midst? Throughout the pages of history, whenever a nation chose to abandon righteousness for strategy, it triggered not only a political decline, but also a spiritual unraveling. The shadow that now falls upon America is not cast merely by its enemies abroad, but by its choices within. For when a nation begins to compromise the values that made it strong, when it chooses expedience over covenant, when it aligns itself with instability while forsaking the faithful, it invites not favor, but judgment. Judgment does not always come in the form of fire or war. Sometimes it comes in silence. Sometimes it comes in the slow erosion of influence, the quiet unraveling of trust, the subtle loss of moral clarity. In 2025, America stands at such a threshold. The pivot toward Pakistan, a nation long entangled in double games and regional instability, may seem like a clever maneuver on the surface. But beneath it lies a violation, a betrayal not only of a partner but of principle, and that betrayal carries a price. In ancient times, when nations betrayed their covenants for the sake of temporary power, they began a descent into confusion. Their enemies grew stronger. Their allies drifted away. Their people became divided, and their strength, once unshakable, began to fracture from within. What we now witness is not merely an alliance shifting. We are witnessing a foundation cracking. India, once a reliable partner, is now forced into a posture of caution, and rightfully so. For when trust is broken at the highest levels, it does not end with one decision. It echoes across generations. America's silent withdrawal and its sudden embrace of a known destabilizer is not simply a miscalculation. It is the signal of something deeper. It reveals a nation no longer guided by conviction, but by convenience. And when a nation chooses convenience, it steps out from under the covering of divine favor. This is the judgment, not imposed by an outside force, but invited by internal compromise. For years, India stood as a friend to the United States. It offered more than trade and technology. It offered integrity, shared vision, and cultural bridges between East and West. And for years, that partnership grew. But in 2025, the United States has chosen to tilt away, not because of India's failure, but because of America's forgetfulness. It has forgotten the price of liberty. It has forgotten the weight of alliance. And in that forgetfulness, it opens itself to a consequence it cannot control. Pakistan, though strategically placed, is not a vessel of peace. It is a vessel of unpredictability. And the moment America tied its future engagements to Pakistan, it also tethered itself to the volatility of that region. This is not a step toward strength. It is a march toward instability. Judgment begins when light is exchanged for shadow, when truth is replaced by politics. Okay? When long-term loyalty is sacrificed on the altar of short-term opportunity. The America of 2025 may not yet realize it, but the shaking has already begun. The world sees the tremble in markets, in diplomacy, in global trust. And India, observing from a position of disappointment, now prepares not to protest, but to pivot. It begins to chart a course of self-reliance, not out of anger, but out of awakening. For betrayal can either break a nation or refine it. In India's case, it is refining. It is realizing that its destiny was never meant to be chained to another power, but to rise as one of its own. And as it rises, the contrast will grow clearer. A nation walking in integrity will be set against a nation walking in confusion. And that contrast will not be ignored by the rest of the world. The global south, the east, the emerging powers, they are all watching. They see who stands with honor and who sways with shifting winds. And as they watch, they choose. They align. They build the new order. America, by embracing instability, is slowly removing itself from the center of global trust. It is not being pushed out. It is step by silent step. By silent step. And with each step, the consequences deepen. Allies question. Rivals rejoice. And the prophetic voice grows louder. There was a time when America stood as a beacon of loyalty, but now in its pursuit of tactical gain, it forgets the very foundations that gave it influence. And what is forgotten is eventually lost. The judgment is not punishment, it is exposure. Exposure of priorities, exposure of motives, exposure of weakness, and through that exposure, a shaking. In Scripture, when nations turned to false alliances, they thought they had gained advantage. But instead, they opened the door to invasion, to betrayal, to collapse. Today's betrayal is no different. The pivot to Pakistan is not a door to peace, but to deception. The shaking has already begun, and only those who discern can see it. India, in the face of betrayal, must not respond in vengeance, but in vision. It must rise not merely as a counterbalance, but as a testimony that integrity still stands, even when alliances fall. A testimony that trust once broken need not lead to bitterness, but to breakthrough. For in betrayal there is opportunity, not for revenge, but for revelation. And the revelation is this, that no nation is truly secure when its choices are not guided by truth. America must wake up before it is too late. For if it continues down this road, the shaking will not be limited to the diplomatic table. It will reach into its economy, its institutions, influence. The judgment will unfold slowly, subtly, but surely. And only those who turn back will find the way forward. The signs are already here. A friend ignored, a destabilizer embraced, a pattern repeated, and a consequence unfolding. In the eyes of the world, it may appear as politics. But in the eyes of eternity, it is much more. It is a reckoning. Every great turning in human history has been marked by a moment where silence was broken and truth was declared, not for the approval of men, but for alignment with something far greater than human institutions. In 2025, the silence surrounding the shift in global alliances is not empty. It is loaded with spiritual tension, waiting for someone to interpret the signs. This is not just about America and India or even Pakistan. It is about the soul of nations. When covenants are broken, when faithfulness is discarded, and when the righteous are abandoned in favor of the unstable, a spiritual transaction takes place, and that transaction always carries consequences. In this moment, the test is not only for America, it is for the remnant within it, the watchmen, the few who still remember what truth sounds like and what righteousness looks like in the public square. They are not political. They are prophetic. They do not speak in slogans, but in signs. And the signs now point toward a shaking that cannot be ignored. America, once a light to the nations, now flickers under the weight of its own compromise. It seeks alignment with those who have long operated in duplicity, ignoring the cost of past decisions and repeating the very patterns that once led to disaster. But where there is betrayal, there is also a chance for redemption. If a nation will turn, if a people will awaken, if leaders will hear the whisper behind the noise, then the script can still be revised. The betrayal is real. The shaking is underway, but so is the call. And that call is not to despair, it is to discern, to watch, to warn, and to walk forward with eyes wide open. For history belongs not to the powerful, but to the faithful.